Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Lebanese workers threaten to escalate protests over new wage scale. Radical Israeli social justice activists question Zionism. And Bahraini demonstrators vow loyalty to their movement's prisoners of conscience. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
Hundreds of public sector workers responded to the Union Coordination Committee's call to participate in a demonstration that headed to the government palace.
The public sector took to the street. Its employees protested against a government whose officials are seemingly deaf. The workers' demands are not new. These same demands united them. They stood shoulder to shoulder with unions in a centralized demonstration launched from Barbir Square to the government palace. Here, in Riyadh al-Sulh Square, security forces received military reinforcement in an attempt to prevent the voices of the workers to reach the residence of the government palace. The main reason for this mobilization is to demand a new salary and wage scale. However, the mobilization mainly uncovered the government's policy of stalling and asking for concessions on any demand.
The Union Coordination Committee will not back down on its boycott of correcting official exams. And we will not back down on taking further and stepped-up action until the pay scale has been approved by Parliament as soon as possible.
It seems they can't hear there's a thing called the Arab Spring. It seems they can't hear that after 50 years, the Arab people are rising up for their freedom. And now, some ministers want to silence us. No one can take away our sacred right to strike. We tell the Prime Minister, you told us, Mr. Prime Minister, that this would be done in June, and it wasn't. After the subcommittee's meeting, you promised us, but you did not keep your word. You promised us a third time and said, Chairman, we will hold successive sessions on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and this will be our priority. We cannot bear it anymore, Mr. Prime Minister. Within 10 days, either the government approves it or let this government that rules in all of your names leave while you tell it to leave.
The protest was over and its participants left, but it does not mean the mobilization is over. Tomorrow, another day of strike was announced to advance demands that echoed across all regions.
Pressure is mounting on the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu as demands for his departure is intensifying. Self-immolation has become the latest trend in expressing frustration and anger at Netanyahu's socio- and economic policies. Some of the protesters are now questioning Zionism as a whole. Ibrahim Hosseini explains why.
Israel's social justice protests in its second summer. Frustrated protesters getting more vocal and more violent. Self-immolation is the latest trend after protesters smashed windows of banks in Tel Aviv. At least 5 cases of self-immolation were reported since mid-July, signaling a new phase in the rise against the Israeli regime and the current state of affairs. Eretz Wagner, an Israeli activist, explains why people are so frustrated.
People fighting, people get killed, and there is nothing. In the end, they see that everything is corrupted, that there is no social justice. It's a disbelief in the regime.
Last summer's protests, the socio-economic agenda dominated, but Zionism is now being questioned.
It's a start of asking questions about the Zionism, about the Jewish people here come and say to themselves, it's a Jewish country, we are here and we are fighting against the Arab, and etc., and the country will give us social justice. But there is nothing from that.
Guy Aloni, a university lecturer, says the protest should aim for equal rights for all, in clear reference that it's not just about economics.
I think the movement is very important, and I think it's a part of something that's going on in the whole world, in the Middle East, and also in Europe. And I think that we are very infected from it, and I hope it will get to a position where we can change the system, change the regime, and make a better place in this spot of social justice or social place, and equal to all, with all the rights of people that deserve it.
But when asked about the current regime and its answer to the protesters' demands,
I think there is no way for Bibi Netanyahu to understand what the people demand. I think he should go home, and he should pay for his consequences of what he did to the people.
Netanyahu's ruling coalition was weakened earlier in the month when Kadima party pulled out after failing to reach an agreement over mandatory military service. As it stands now, Orthodox Jews do not serve in the Israeli army. New questions are being asked. Did Zionism deliver what it has promised? And more importantly, who's benefiting from it? These are the words of some of the activists we spoke with. But as these questions are being raised, activists warn that neoliberalism and fascism is so deeply entrenched in the Israeli psyche, and therefore are suggesting that a long battle still lies ahead. Ibrahim Husseini, Press TV, Jerusalem, Al-Quds.
شنت أجهزة الأمن الإماراتية فجر اليوم حملة اعتقالات واسعة طالت مجموعة من النشطاء.
The Emirati security agencies launched an arrest campaign this morning, targeting a number of rights activists. These arrests are part of the security agency's persecution of members of the Reform and Social Guidance Association, which has links to the Muslim Brotherhood, and a number of reform and human rights activists. For its part, the Kuwaiti online Al Shahid newspaper said the Emirates accused 40 Kuwaitis, including 2 parliament members, politicians, and academics, of involvement in what was said to be a cell that threatens the security of the country. In return, Reporters Without Borders demanded the Emirati authorities release all activists held on charges of opposing the constitution. The organization called for an end to recurring arrests, considering them to be a blatant violation of basic freedoms.
في الشارع البحريني خرجت مسيرات احتجاج سلمية في أنحاء البحرين لتأكيد المطالب.
Peaceful marches were held across Bahrain to reaffirm popular demands for change and the establishment of democratic rule in the country. In response, Saudi-backed government forces cracked down on the marches with tear gas and pellet bullets. Amnesty International called on Al Manama's authorities to release all prisoners of conscience ahead of the appeals of human rights activist Nabil al-Rajab and 9 medical workers.
من الكادر الطبي.
The people of Bahrain have been holding on to their slogans since protests started on February 14, 2011. The voice of the Bahraini revolution still resounds as strongly, and the people's demands for change and democratic rule remain the same. They insist on attaining their demands despite the Manama regime's use of different methods of repression and arrests. In addition, its forces have surrounded towns and villages to quell the peaceful popular marches. These marches swept different parts of Bahrain, including Sitra Island and the villages of Sarakan and Al-Sanabis, then Al-Dair, and the capital, Manama. Demonstrators confirmed their loyalty to the movement's leaders that are detained in the regime's prisons. In exchange, the sound of bullet shots echoed as usual. Saudi occupation-backed Bahraini forces attacked the marches with weapons and tear gas.
وفي ظل مواصلة سلطات البحرين انتهاكاتها لحقوق الإنسان.
And amid the Bahraini authorities' continued human rights violations, Amnesty International called on Al-Manama's authorities to release all prisoners of conscience ahead of the appeals of human rights activist Nabil Al-Rajab and 9 medical workers. The organization said in a statement that it will consider the 9 detained medical workers to be prisoners of conscience, held solely for peacefully exercising their right to freedom of expression. Amnesty International's Middle East and North Africa Deputy Program Director Hasiba Haj Sarawi stressed that all prisoners of conscience must be set free immediately and unconditionally before the appeals take place.
Clashes are continuing in Aleppo in the countryside of Damascus between the regime's army and the Free Army, as Russia describes the United States' position as justifying terrorism, while Turkey partially seals its border with Syria.
Wide-scale violent clashes took place in the neighborhoods of the city of Aleppo between the armed opposition and regime forces. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported that the city's neighborhood of Bustan al-Qasr and the neighborhood of Saif al-Dawla witnessed the most violent clashes at dawn near the College of Sciences and near the Immigration and Passports branch, and in the neighborhood of al-Jumayliyah near an office branch of the ruling Ba'ath Party. And in the countryside of Aleppo, the city of al-Bab, where groups of the Free Syrian Army are stationed, was shelled by regime forces. According to the coordination committees, the frequency of the battles remains the same in the neighborhoods of the countryside of Damascus, Idlib, and its countryside. But according to Syrian state-run TV, the regime's army was tasked with cleaning neighborhoods in the countryside of Damascus, in Basatin Daraya, and Bayadr al-Nadir of terrorist groups, after seizing heavy, medium, and light weapons from them. On the political front, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov reiterated the importance of implementing the UN envoy to Syria, Kofi Annan's, plan to settle the crisis. He described the European Union's measures that include imposing an air and sea blockade on Syria as counterproductive. He also announced that his country does not recognize unilateral sanctions, criticizing U.S. Ambassador to the UN Susan Rice, saying that her statement implies that the United States will continue to support similar terrorist acts as long as the UN Security Council does not do what the U.S. wants.
The Western resolution at the UN Security Council included terms that are not part of the Geneva Agreement. We are surprised that the West did not condemn the terrorist act at the National Security Building in Damascus. The US position on Syria justifies terrorism because those who control the Syrian border crossings are groups from Al-Qaeda.
على صعيد آخر منعت تركيا دخول مواطنيها إلى سوريا لدواعٍ أمنية عبر 3.
On the other hand, Turkey banned its citizens from entering Syria for security reasons at 3 crossings controlled by the Syrian opposition last week, according to official sources. The 3 crossings are located near the Syrian crossings of Jarablus, Bab al-Hawa, and al-Salema. Turkish official sources announced that the armed opposition damaged 30 Turkish trucks and burned 9 of them at the Bab al-Hawa crossing.
The newly appointed Egyptian Prime Minister Hisham Kandil said that his new government will be a technocratic government and that he expects to complete forming it within several days. Mohamed Morsi's decision to appoint Kandil, who was the Minister of Irrigation under Prime Minister Ghanzouri's government, came as a surprise to observers and set off mixed reactions on the Egyptian political street.
Morsi finally chose his prime minister. Hisham Kandil, who was not expected to preside over the government, graduated from the College of Engineering like Morsi and spent some time in the United States like him as well. He returned to Egypt to work at a research center and then started working at the Ministry of Irrigation in the late 1990s. He was appointed irrigation minister last year.
First, it will be a technocratic government, and competence is the fundamental criterion. Certainly, there are many factors that we must consider, but I confirm that competence is the fundamental criterion in choosing the ministers.
The choice came as a surprise to most observers.
We were expecting a prime minister with an economics background because Egypt's economic problem is greater. It is the most important problem at this time. But a prime minister that has no links to the economy was chosen. The minister does not have any previous links to politics. It is not known whether he was in politics.
On social networking sites, comments were ignited between opponents and supporters of the decision. The opponents believe the country is currently in need of a political prime minister who is able to lead a truly national unity government. They doubted Kandil is qualified to assume this position. As for the supporters, they praised his record at the irrigation ministry, believing that what Egypt needs now is an efficient prime minister with no political affiliations. The streets of Cairo and Giza are completely paralyzed, which is the norm at this time of day, every day. Mohamed Morsi promised to solve the problem of traffic within the first 100 days of his rule. Away from the political debate that accompanied the appointment of Hisham Kandil as prime minister, the ability of Kandil and Morsi to solve an issue like this one will be how people will judge their failure or success. Khalid Al-Arab, BBC, Cairo.
Social welfare groups, opposition, and even coalition parties today slammed the plan of Prime Minister Netanyahu and Finance Minister Steinitz to increase value-added tax by 1% and introduce a massive package of budget cuts. We get more on this report from IBA's Aaron Viner.
Finance Minister Yuval Steinitz is slated to appear before the cabinet on Monday when he will ask for approval to raise the value-added tax by 1% and to simultaneously slash the government budget by nearly 1 billion shekels. He's also expected to request that the Treasury authorize 600 new employees join the tax authority to more efficiently collect revenues. Many social welfare groups today claim that the tax hikes will further burden the Israeli public, which is already struggling to make ends meet. There will also be tax hikes on alcohol and other luxury items such as cigarettes. And adding to consumers' burdens, taxes on gasoline are set to be increased again, up to 40 to 50 agarot per liter due to rising world oil prices. Opposition leader Shaul Mofaz of Kadima said that after having already turned his back on the middle class who serve in the army, Netanyahu is now giving them the middle finger. Labor leader Shelley Yakimovich blasted the proposals as taking money from the poor to give to the rich, saying that they amount to less health, less education, and less internal security. The Prime Minister's coalition partners are also angry that they weren't consulted in advance. And Shas Party leader Eli Shai said that only taxation of non-essential items should be increased. Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman also voiced his own dissent to the VAT increase, as well as the wide-ranging budget cuts. Finance Minister Steinitz defended his plan, saying that the long-term benefit includes reducing the national debt to GDP by the year 2020 to 60%. Prime Minister Netanyahu assured the public of the continuity of certain programs, such as free preschool in accordance with the Trachtenberg Committee on Social Change, but said that he will not endanger the state by spending for populist purposes, such as has been happening in leading European economies. He stressed that his plan demonstrates fiscal responsibility. If passed by the cabinet on Monday, each 1% increase of the VAT is expected to generate an additional 4 billion shekels a year for the government. This is Aaron Viner for IBA News.
Following a hectic week in which Kadima left the coalition and the government failed to pass an alternative version of the TA law for a fair system of drafting citizens to the military or national service, the Knesset broke today for its summer recess. The opposition is calling on Prime Minister Netanyahu to dissolve the Knesset and go to elections this November. The Knesset resumes after the end of the high holy days in October.
The National Medicines and Poisons Board in Sudan agreed to increase the price of locally produced medicine by 40% and between 80 to 90% of those imported. The Drug Manufacturers Association in Sudan signaled halting production in factories which meet half of the country's demands as a reaction to the austerity policies adopted by the government to face the effects of the recent economic crisis.
According to the Chamber for the Import of Medicines, pharmaceutical companies in Sudan, lacking funds and feeling the pressure of the recent economic measures imposed by the government due to the challenging economic situation, are facing real obstacles and are under the threat of bankruptcy. More than 200 pharmaceutical companies and 20 factories that produce about 400 kinds of medicine and cover 50% of the citizens' needs are facing the danger of bankruptcy and a complete production halt.
Foreign currency problems will affect the factories because they will not be able to import the resources they need. If they stop production, it means that 50% of the medicines used by Sudanese citizens will no longer be available, and we will be forced to import them and pay more for medicines that had been produced inside Sudan.
For its part, the Consumer Protection Association has alerted that the citizens' health could be jeopardised by the law of supply and demand. At the same time, it called on the Finance Ministry and the Central Bank of Sudan to bear what it called a moral responsibility in the crisis. This means it has to provide funds for pharmaceutical companies and medical importers before the matter is exacerbated and reaches a point of no return.
Medicine is not less important than wheat. Medicine must be funded by £2.70 like wheat. Because wheat is an optional commodity, but medicine is a mandatory commodity, it is not chosen by the consumer. It is mandated by a third party, the doctor. National industry must be subsidized. National industry is not protected or funded. The quality of the national industry is hundreds of times better than factories abroad.
But the central bank assures that changes in the currency rate amid the liberalization of the economy is considered part of commercial risks that the central bank cannot bear. Moreover, an official assured that €15 million will be allocated to import medicine. Experts in the country's pharmaceutical sector confirm that if the pharmaceutical factories stop producing medicine, the price of imported medicine will increase nearly threefold. This is in addition to the disappearance of 400 kinds of medicine from the market. Health-conscious citizens fear that the market's madness will impact both their health and treatments. Osama Sid Ahmed, Al Jazeera, Khartoum.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.